We've all been there, right? You're staring at a multiple choice question, your future might be hanging in the balance, and you just get this feeling, the suspicion that the test isn't just seeing what you know, it's actively trying to trip you up. Well, it turns out there's a fascinating hidden science behind crafting a question that is actually fair and effective.
Oh, yeah, that feeling is universal. You know the material, you've studied for weeks, but the question is just so weirdly worded, so ambiguous, that you're left completely guessing. And it turns out you're not imagining it. A badly designed question isn't just a little frustrating, it's a broken tool.
Just take a look at this real-world example from a guide for medical examiners. The question asks what's true about pseudogout. But look at the options. We're jumping from genetics to gender to treatment. I mean, it's apples and oranges. This forces you to guess which random fact the writer thought was the most important, which is a terrible way to figure out who actually knows their stuff.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at when good tests go bad. Then, we'll find out about the gold standard, the one best answer format. After that, we'll dissect the anatomy of a truly great question, expose the 7 deadly sins of test writing, and finally, see how this all leads to better tests and way better doctors.
Look, when the stakes are low, a bad question is just an annoyance, right? But in a field like medicine, where these tests decide who gets to become a doctor, a flawed question is a serious public health issue. It could fail to spot an incompetent student or unfairly punish a really smart one, all for the wrong reasons. The goal isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about knowing who can actually apply them. So how do you fix this? Well, it all starts with choosing the right format. Test designers have to pick from a couple main families of questions, and believe me, the one they choose completely changes what's actually being measured. So you've basically got 2 main formats, one best answer and true-false. With the one best answer, your job is to find the single most correct option out of a bunch of pretty plausible ones. The true-false family, on the other hand, asks you if each option is absolutely true or false, and that's where things can get really fuzzy really fast. And this is exactly why the experts, I'm talking about the people at the National Board of Medical Examiners, overwhelmingly prefer the one best answer format. See, it's not about spitting back black and white facts. It's about judgment. It's about weighing different possibilities and thinking like a doctor. It tests those higher order skills, which is precisely what you want in a high-stakes exam. Okay, so we've picked our format, but how do you actually write a good one best answer question? Well, it's not some mysterious art. It's really a craft that has very clear rules. There are 5 core principles that turn a simple question into a precision instrument for assessment. You can think of these as the 5 commandments. First, test something that actually matters. No trivia questions. Second, and this one is so important, test the application of knowledge, not just someone's ability to memorize. Third, the question itself has to be crystal clear. Fourth, all the answer choices should look believable. And finally, you have to go on a hunt to find and destroy any technical flaws. And here's a fantastic little gut check for that third rule. It's called the cover the options rule. It's simple. If you can read the clinical story and the question and actually figure out the right answer in your head before you even look at the choices, well, that is the sign of a beautifully focused question. And this just perfectly captures the soul of Rule 2. I mean, look at the difference here. The question on the left, that's a textbook question. You could just look that up. But the one on the right, now that is a clinical puzzle. It gives you a real-world story and asks you to solve it. It forces you to think, to put the pieces together, just like a real doctor has to do every single day. All right, now for the really fun part, the mistakes. Even with the best intentions, it is so easy to accidentally build flaws into a question. These are what we call the deadly sins of item writing, little technical errors that can totally undermine a test's fairness. These flaws pretty much fall into 2 camps. Some just add irrelevant difficulty. They make the question hard, but for reasons that have nothing to do with medicine. But the second category, oh, this one's more sneaky, test wiseness cues. These are little clues, like loopholes in a computer program, that a savvy test taker can exploit to guess the right answer without actually knowing the material. Let's look at a classic example of one of these test wiseness cues. Just read the question stem out loud. Her diagnosis is most likely to be Anne. Now look at the options. You see the problem? Yep, the grammar totally gives it away. The article "an" only fits with option A, asthma attack. A test-wise student doesn't need to know a single thing about medicine, they just need to know basic English grammar. They can get rid of the other three options in a heartbeat. That's not a test of knowledge, it's a grammar quiz. And the fix, thankfully, is so simple. You just rephrase the question so it's grammatically neutral. Which of the following is the most likely diagnosis? Boom, the playing field is level again. The clue is gone, and the test is back to being about medicine. And that grammar trick is just one of many, many flaws. This table shows a few other classics you might even recognize. For example, using absolute terms like always or never, which are almost never true in a complex field like medicine, is usually a dead giveaway for a wrong answer. Or, my favorite, the longer option is often the right one because the writer just subconsciously added more detail to make it sound correct. These are all little tells a savvy student can use to game the system. Okay, so a question gets written, it gets reviewed, but the story doesn't end there. Nope. After the test is actually taken, a whole other science kicks in to analyze the results. It's called psychometrics, and it's how test makers use cold, hard data to see if their questions actually worked. And the consequences are massive. The most basic tool they use is called the p-value. Now, don't let the name scare you. It's just a fancy term for how hard the question was. It's simply the percentage of people who got it right. If 80% of students nailed it, the p-value is 0.80. This is the very first piece of data they look at to see how a question held up in the real world. And there are immediate red flags. For example, if a question has a p-value below 0.30, meaning fewer than 30% of students got it right, it gets flagged. Is the question just broken? Was the topic not taught well? Or is it just a legitimately difficult concept? The data forces them to ask these hard questions. But difficulty isn't the whole story. A good question also has to discriminate. Now, that just means that students who did great on the whole test should be way more likely to get this specific question right than students who did poorly overall. Like this chart shows, if the top students and the bottom students are getting it right at about the same rate, then the question isn't doing its job. It isn't separating those who know their stuff from those who don't. And this is why all of this really matters. This incredibly rigorous process of writing, reviewing, and analyzing questions is what creates fair assessments. It's what pushes medical students to learn how to apply knowledge, not just memorize a bunch of facts. This makes sure the doctors we all rely on are not just good test takers, but are actually good clinical problem solvers. And that ultimately leads to better, safer care for every single one of us. So the next time you're facing a really well-crafted question, remember this. It's not just some hurdle you have to jump over. It's the product of a deep science, designed from the ground up to be fair, accurate, and meaningful. A great test doesn't just ask you what you know, it respects what you know. And in a way,